So now you know kind of the neurobiological term of amygdala hijack and kind of its role. Once we've got to acceleration and we're into peak frustration or the amygdala hijack, it's important to know there are many teachable moments throughout one's day, but this is not one of them. We understand that the ability to access the rational brain in the prefrontal cortex, it's not there. It's not planned behavior at this point. This is neurobiology. This is the most likely spot, by the way, and please, if you hear nothing else, this is really important. This is the most likely spot for you as a teacher or EA or an administrator to enjoy their own hijack. It's hard not to take some of the things that happen in this state from a student personally. Stuff is coming out of their mouth. Oftentimes it's incredibly disturbing. There's a lot of threats being made. There's not a lot of thought for what it really means or what it means to anybody else's feelings or anything like that. This is the toughest time for you to keep it together yourself, but it's also the most important. That's why I wanted to try and apply a scientific lens to this. Hopefully that you know it's just neurobiology. It's not targeted. Now, I think all of us have seen a de-escalation and recovery. I have in the past called it kind of the ugly cry period or the, I want a hug period or whatever it is. The important part to note for the de-escalation into the recovery time is that it's not over. And if you note, that arrow is now going both ways. They are no longer quite as hijacked, but please don't confuse this with being over or the situation over. They still don't have much access to the rational brain. A lot of times there's, yeah, but he said this, or you hate me, or this isn't fair, or whatever it is. It's not reasonable. It's still not a teachable moment. Your biggest ally right now is making sure the student doesn't go back into hijack and letting the wonderful thing called the world turning or time work for you. The brain has to have time to return its focus and return its ability up to the prefrontal cortex. Now we're going to turn the corner. You've done everything great. The student is starting to return to it. Is there internalizing or externalizing behaviors? A lot of times at this time, the student is really needing to be safe. We see internalizing behaviors like really quiet or hoodie up over their head or all of those things. We see externalizing behaviors where they really get hyper and they want to run or do whatever. Sometimes we see absolute fatigue where the student almost needs to go to sleep because they've had so much cortisol flooding their system while this is going on. Are we back to business as usual? And no, not very likely. However, this can start to be finally the teachable moment. The student can be back in the class at this point, or if the student was safe all along, they might have been removed to the back of the room with somebody else's presence or whatever it is. And again, I'm not going to get into strategy in this so much as I am going to just talk a little bit about an overview of the model. There are ways to make this work, but it's important to know that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to reconnect the student, reassure the student, make sure they're safe, make sure that their dignity is intact, make sure that the other students' dignity and safety are intact, and make sure that we can reconnect the relationship. It has to be understood, and we can start to teach our students about this model, by the way. But if everybody understands that there's a flipping of the lid that occurs and we all go through that as human beings, it's not personal and it's not anybody's fault, it just is. We can start to recognize when baseline goes to trigger, when something happens, what it looks like to go to agitation. When acceleration occurs, we can have pre-planned ideas. Obviously, when peak or frustration happens, we can do something about that, down into recovery and down into the bottom of the moment. This is the overview, and it's really important to see that there is a see and do. You're not powerless. Once you see something, there are so many things that you actually can do. In my experience over all these years I've been doing this, one of the best things you can do is stay calm. When we start to lose it, or we think that it's a teachable moment, or we take it personally, or any of those things, it is really, really tough to have it not go to the top of the kite. So that's kind of if there is a rule, that's sort of is rule number one. And I really do know how tough it is. If you look under acceleration, you see defiance, verbal abuse, sometimes avoidance and escape. They're boogieing all over the hallways and they're doing all those things. Agitation is refusal, vocalizing, I hate this stuff. Why do we have to do it? I don't feel like doing this today. All of that stuff, it's hard for you to not take it personally. It's hard for me to not take it personally. But it is really important to try not to. What you're doing is a hard job. So if this helps at all to just see sort of the neurobiological underpinnings of the kite model, we'll talk more about, okay, now we know this, where do we go from here?